Okay. Hi, welcome to this special edition of the Idea Day video panel. I'm Heather Teis, and I'm joined by some ministry wives here who are good friends of mine. And we are going to be talking about a very, very important topic today, something that I think is going to be a blessing to a lot of you who are in ministry. In fact, this topic, I put out about 3 different topics to some groups of pastors' wives that are on Facebook. And I said, which of these would you rather hear talked about? And by far, dealing with discouragement won over the others, because I think that's something that's impossible to be in ministry for a long amount of time, maybe even a short amount of time, and to not have to deal with some discouragement, because you are not just working a regular job, you are in a spiritual battle. And so I've got 3 wonderful ladies here. All of these ladies are going to be joining me at Idea Day on the Pastor's Wife panel. If you've not been to Idea Day, I want to encourage you to come, ladies, because it is a great chance to make ministry connections. We need friends, and these are ladies that you can connect with. We all have different temperaments. We all have different giftedness, different experiences that we're bringing. And last year, the Pastor's Wife panel that we did was by far my favorite thing. I loved hearing the different ideas, and I loved kind of watching the audience, because you could see certain ladies when a woman would talk from the panel, they'd be like, oh, that's me. And they would take that idea, they would take that verse, they would take that encouragement, and then even follow up with that person or the person next to them. They would connect through that day. So let's talk about the ladies that are going to be on the panel this year. I'm going to start with Kimberly Combs. Kimberly, she has, well, I shouldn't tell. I'm going to let Kimberly tell us your name, where you minister, and how long you've been ministering in that place. And then, because we are all moms, tell just a quick about your family, just a little bit. Okay?
All right. I am Kimberly Combs. Sorry, I'm in a room where the light is going to go on and off depending on if I move or not. I have
that
4
saves money,
children.
right?
Right. Fancy. I have 4 children, ages 8 through 14, that I homeschool. I currently serve at Southern Hills Baptist Church. I am the lead pianist at the church, and my husband and I have been here on staff for 10 years this past June.
Yeah. And we are very blessed to have him on here. And my connection was going in and out a little bit on my phone. We're good, Kylie, because it was just my earphone. But did you mention your kids? How many kids do you have?
Yes, I have 4 children, 14, 12, 10, and 8.
And you actually homeschool those children, and that's impressive. So you need to get mad props for that.
I do, or I'm just crazy, or they're going to make me crazy one way or the other.
All right. What about you, Jade? Where are you from? Where do you minister?
We minister in New Braunfels, Texas, which is halfway between San Antonio and Austin. My husband has been the pastor there for 5 years now. And what's a little bit different about our story is that I did not marry a pastor. I married someone who was just planning on going into the workforce and being a help to the pastor of his church in whatever way he could. But through different circumstances, here we are. I have 2 kids, Davy, who is just turned 12, and Emily, who will be 9 in December.
I love it. And I love your story because I've watched you through Facebook. That's where our friendship mostly is. And I've seen you just really embrace that calling. And I know some women, that's a struggle. That's a difficult thing. They said, I did not plan on this. But you have just jumped in wholeheartedly and used your specific gifts to serve in a unique way as a pastor's wife. So, Miss Shonda, tell us about yourself.
I am Shonda Cool, and my husband, Cody, has been the pastor here in Grand Rapids, Michigan. It'll be 8 years this December. So just a month away, actually, from our 8-year anniversary. I have 3 children. They are 11, 8, and 2.
Wow.
So,
and I can't believe it's been 8 years since y'all been up there. It seems like just yesterday. Yeah. And something you may not know about Shonda is that she is very active. So you're a runner. And have you done a marathon yet? A full marathon?
No, I haven't yet. I decided to have a baby instead. And the training was just too time intensive. And, God had another plan for me with that. But I'm looking at this winter getting, back into the longer distances and having, some longer races to train for, get back into it.
So what's the longest race you've done so far?
I've done a couple half marathons.
That's impressive. So I've got a friend trying to talk me into a half marathon coming up, and we will see.
It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun.
There's a lot of commitment there. So we'll see if I'm up for the challenge.
Yeah.
I'm Heather Teis. I minister in Las Vegas, Nevada at Southern Hills Baptist Church. And I have 3 children. Oh, we've been here how many years? We have been here, I always have to count up, 14. 14 years since we started the church here in Vegas. And I have 3 children. 2 of them are teenagers. So that is, it's wonderful. I love having teenagers. Everybody says, oh, wait till they're teenagers. I love having teenagers. But it is just shock to me continually. I feel the clock counting down, especially with my oldest. And I am getting very sentimental and sad. I was not one of those moms that was crying at the kindergarten door. I was good. But now thinking about it's a different thing to me, them going to school and then them actually kind of leaving the nest. So I am all about trying to capture this time that we have and not be sad. I don't want to be sad for the last years about the clock ticking down. My youngest is 9. She'll be 10 in December. So I have a son and a daughter who are teenagers. All right, let's talk about discouragement in ministry. So ladies, the first question is one that maybe a little bit more difficult because it's dealing with specifics. So maybe you can give some guidelines. The question is, how do you determine what should slide off your back and what you should confront? So when there's an offense, how do you determine what to just let go and to let love cover? And how do you determine, okay, I'm actually going to have a conversation about this? Any guidelines? Am I going to call on people? This is like being in small group. When your small group is first starting, you have to get bold and call on people. So Kimberly, I'm going to call on you. I know Kimberly's a great counselor, so I know she's always got wisdom ready to lay down before us. So what have you got, Kimberly?
I think for me, I have to have wisdom to certainly not speak in that moment, because sometimes my first words are words that I'm definitely not going to want to have accountability for. So sometimes in the moment, I try to absorb it. And I think sometimes, a day later, a week later, a month later, I don't even remember it. Sometimes things linger, and I have to bring Jason into the mix and say, hey, babe, this went down. What are your thoughts on it? And sometimes he will have the wisdom to say, honey, I think that's something that you should let go of. Sometimes he would help give some direction on what's a step we could do to fix this. And then I think sometimes there are those problems that just linger, and you've taken them to Jesus' feet and you've talked to your husband and you just feel like it's unresolved. And I think at that point you have to say, okay, how can I proactively speak into the situation because I'm not being released from it at the time?
That is really, really good counsel, is to not respond right away, just to listen and sometimes just to hear something out. I've watched my husband do that, and some of our best ideas have actually come from criticism once we waded through all the stupid stuff. And we're like, oh, we could actually, we could do that. So very good. And ladies, you can jump in at any time. You don't have to wait for me to call on you. What would you add to that though, Jay?
I agree with that wholeheartedly, that just taking that time to pause is a huge, huge part of it for me. Especially maybe when the criticism involves your kids or your husband, because I think that mama bear instinct comes up, and you're just, you get your back up kind of, and you're going to say something you shouldn't, and you're going to say something you wish you could take back. So just taking that moment to step back and maybe even, well, thank you for sharing that with me, and going home and thinking it over and praying about it. And like Kimberly said, sometimes a day later, a week later, it's gone. It's something that you're not even thinking about anymore. And aren't you glad you took that minute to just pause and think and collect yourself a little bit? Another big one for me though, is just praying for wisdom. Just, Lord, this is bothering me. Is it bothering me because maybe there's some truth to it? Is it bothering me because of who
Ouch.
it's coming from. Yeah, exactly. And that's the big one. My husband is always, well, there's potential for a little bit of truth in every bit of criticism that we get. You're like, that's not why I came to you. That's not what I want to hear. But just praying for that wisdom and that discernment. And Lord, is there something here you're trying to show me?
I heard a quote that feelings are like kids. We don't let them drive, but we also don't stuff them in the trunk either. And so I think what you're saying is that sometimes we're feeling really upset about something, we need to step back and say, okay, these feelings are real. They're legit. I'm not going to allow them to control me and to control my response right now. But I do need to say, what's going on here? Is it because there is some truth to that? And maybe they took something so far out of proportion that I just need to realize it's a growing area, but that's why it hurts so deeply. Or do I need to realize maybe I'm tired and I need some rest, and the reason that I'm feeling this way is because so much is going on, in my life. Or that for me, there's been times that it's revealed who I'm really serving. There are times that I've received criticism. In fact, just this year, it's kind of funny because I wouldn't have necessarily gone with this topic. There was another one that was drawing my heart, but I have been through some personal criticism this year, which has been interesting. And the thing that I found out is that it really revealed I did not serve initially those families I really believe my heart was serving the Lord. But and I didn't expect a thank you, but then when criticism came back, then it upset me, and I realized it shouldn't have bothered me that much because I really was doing it for the Lord. It brought me back to who I really am serving. And so what would you add to that, Shonda?
Well, I think everyone said everything that could be said pretty much, everything that I had written down. For me, I've failed a lot in that area. So I definitely come in feeling really unworthy and like, well, I have a lot of ways not to do it. But yeah, something that's really, that God's been teaching me though, in that, because I do feel like I just am in a perpetual state of failure with this area, is, God's really just in the last year helped me to forgive myself and my own failures in these things, because I just can't let it go. And I just like dwell on it and like how I could have done things differently, how I could have spoken differently, how I could have, and there are just some failures you can't come back from. It's over. Like you can't fix it. And that's where I really struggle. And so, I just got to let it go and then learn from it and seek forgiveness, when I can. And, sometimes they don't want to give it, but, for me, just seeking it anyway, and then learning how to forgive myself, which sounds weird, but, that's something that I personally struggle with, is not so most of the time, even with my kids, like failing with my kids, they're so quick to forgive. And a lot of times people are quick to forgive, but we can't move on. Like so that's kind of, I guess, just not dwelling on the past failures in that, and maybe your initial response to the criticism, you blew up, you totally lost it. You totally defended yourself. You totally gave it to them, you know? And you all wise women are the ones that are like, let me just think about that. And I'm just like, excuse me, do you know?
We're saying what you're supposed to do, Shonda.
Yeah, what you're supposed to do. Oh, okay. I feel a lot better.
I'm so I guess that you said that though, because what you said is true. I think a lot of times, a lot of pastors' wives are more introverted, more of those temperaments. And so our husbands very often are the ones who will jump forward and they want to respond. With us, we're the ones that want to hold on to it and carry it and own it, maybe even more than we should. Maybe what they said wasn't even true, but we allow Satan to bring that into our hearts and our minds and to keep us from moving forward in our walk and being confident, maybe even keeping us from other ministry opportunities because we're like, oh, I'm a failure. How it went down back there. I was not a leader to ladies. And I think we can all think back to times where we failed and maybe we even received some criticism that was due, or just in our own hearts, received criticism and we knew it was true. But by God's grace, we have to realize we're a new creature and that those are learning opportunities. Every time we see failure, our focus should not be on the failure. Our focus should be reflected to the faithfulness of God and how good he is that he would still use us, how big he is that he would grow us from that we're not the same. We should not be the same person today that we were, 5-10 years ago. So I think that's so powerful, because I think probably what you hit, Shonda, is where many of us live. A lot of us don't give that immediate response, but we kind of, hold on to it and hurt over it. Kimberly and Jay, I'll give you a chance to respond to that. Is there anything you'd say about holding on to criticism and the fact that maybe you're carrying it not in anger, but in self-condemnation longer than you should? Because I think that was powerful.
I definitely struggle with that. I'm one, like you said, introverted. So I'm one of those ones that's constantly like, oh, I should have done that different. Maybe if I had done this and it would have been better. And you have to chalk it up to a learning experience sometimes. I mean, sometimes those are the biggest lessons that stick with us, are when we do make a mistake. And when we do maybe do it a way that later we're like, man, what was I thinking? But I struggle with that personally. I'll admit that. I'm way harder on myself than I am on anyone else. I'll forgive anybody anything unless it was me that did it. And then it's like, oh, how could you? Oh my goodness, you're going to ruin your husband's ministry and everything because of that one thing. So yeah, no, I totally get that.
I have some friends that I love them so much because they're very different from me. I'm actually praying right now that God will give me more boldness in his spirit to speak truth. And that sounds so harsh. It sounds like I'm ready to call people out. Like I'm ready to be the offender. I don't mean that. I sometimes positive truth. Like, do you realize this is who God made you? Maybe you should consider this ministry as the Spirit leads in that. And sometimes it's even, just being more bold, because I'm not a confronter. I have friends that are amazing, that sometimes they will call someone out in a good, righteous way and say, you know what? You're not speaking truth right now. So whether it's another staff member or whatever, they'll say, that is wrong, and that's going to destroy your ministry and your marriage and your life. I listen to what some of them say. And Kimberly, you might be more along that line because you're very good. You've got, I think, some gift of prophecy and that clarity and that boldness. But that always has to be tempered with grace, which you do so well. Some of us are praying for more boldness on when to speak out, when to confront. What would you say about confronting? Let's say you do need to speak out. Someone really, I know you've even done this with women that you care for within the church, whether it's in younger staff ladies within a small group community, where they are really struggling and hurting themselves and not responding well to women around them. How do you jump in and say, here's what you need to know?
I think it takes wisdom, and I don't think everyone can be called out all the time. Sometimes I think if you're stepping into someone's life, you have to have a little bit of a relationship with them, because not everyone's open to hearing wisdom or instruction. And sometimes it's easier for me to come alongside someone if it's not already personal. If it's personal to me, I find that I am not very confrontational when it's personal, but where I struggle is I don't think it hurts me as deeply as it can hurt some people. But I also know that I also feel like I can just, when I turn my emotions off, I turn them off too strongly. So I might turn my emotions off so that doesn't hurt. But then if I'm not careful, I can become cold and distant towards that person. So I'm not going to call them out, but I might let a little bit of a distance or wall grow there. And I have to be very aware of that situation. But to come along someone else who is needing some direction, I feel like you just have to have a little bit of a background and a little bit of a relationship before you can sit down and draw them in.
I think that's a really, really good thought. I'm going to mention something. Let's see, we've got to bring Jay back on. I think she lost her internet, so she should be back with us. And there she is. Kimberly, I think that's a lot of good wisdom right there. For those of us who are needing to learn to confront, I found sometimes you do have a relationship with someone. For example, there was something with a staff member just this week that there was an interaction on a text thread between me and that person, and I was kind of just offended by it. It really kind of ticked off a little. I don't get angry often, but it really kind of steamed burned my biscuits. It steamed me off a little bit. And I remember I was praying about it, and it was just eating me up. And then I realized something I've learned from my husband is that sometimes we get offended just because we don't communicate well. And because we're not willing to be a little more bold and say, listen, what are you saying here? Or I want you to understand my thoughts in this. And so sometimes we don't need to go out and make a big drama thing about it. You offended me. I think we take that context of Matthew, or that verse passage in Matthew, out of context, and we want to confront everything, and it's about my feelings, where we just need to sometimes let love cover sins and be spirit filled and say, I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt. But sometimes when we're working in a serving relationship with someone, whether it's paid staff or volunteer staff, we need to be bold enough to go and say, hey, I just want you to know, here's why I was saying this. Here was my heart behind it. Here's some details you don't know that's been going around. It made me realize they didn't. And then they responded in more detail, and I realized, oh, they knew they have the right heart. They're not being, kind of cold and unempathetic like I thought they were to this situation. I was assuming stuff because we had not communicated well. So I think some of us, we have to be a little more bold. We don't like confrontation, but if we learn more and we will step out and communicate well, and that can be scary at first, it won't be a confrontation. It won't be a fight. And we can maintain things with our teammates better. And by the way, I'll throw that out, especially if you're working with men, whether it be your husband or another staff member. Sometimes they just give that short answer, and it can seem cut and dry when it's not really. And we need to follow. And some women, their temperament, they're very businesslike that way. So that was one thought there. So what are some ways that you deal with discouragement when you have been discouraged? I know we talked about this a little bit but we were talking about what to not, what do we take and what do we deal with? And then how do you, when you are discouraged, how do you battle that? What are some things that you do? Shonda, let's start with you. What are some things when you're discouraged that you go to? What's your go-to?
Well, I guess, first of all, it depends on what is causing the discouragement. So I determine, first of all, is this something that's out of my control? Maybe like a family in our church moves away, and I'm just like heartbroken over that. And it has nothing to do with anything I've done, nothing they've done. It's just a hurt that happens, and that can be discouraging. Or if it's something that I'm discouraged by, for example, not spending enough time with our family or investing in my kids. I'm really discouraged by the fact that my house is in shambles. And because we've been really busy with missions week or something, so it just depends, first of all, what the cause of the discouragement is. A lot of times I just need to get some rest and just wash my face or take a shower, it's just been a lot of late nights. And I just need some self-care, just to clean myself up and, get back, together physically. But other times it's just completely out of my control, and I just need to, just move forward and trust the Lord for, what he has for me in the future.
So ladies, kind of building on that, sometimes there's value in, there's self-care, but sometimes there's value in what we call venting. And I know you have to be careful with this. You have to be spiritually minded, but where is the line? And do you have any guidelines or thoughts on, sometimes I know for me, just talking to a friend about this really hurt me and here's what's going on and I'm just about to lose it and I just need to to someone that I think they have to be a spiritual friend, that they're not going to talk to other people, and they know that you're not walking away from ministry, that you're not going to do something, and they're not necessarily going to, encourage you into sin or one thing or the other, but or take offense for you, but they're going to listen and they get it. What thoughts do you have there about venting? Is it appropriate?
I think there are times when it's, I'll speak first. I think there are times when it's needful. I know for me, I can get so in my own head about something that you have turned it into this situation that it is not. And sometimes having a trusted friend that you can talk to that will speak that truth that you were talking about, that will look at you and be like, girl, you're crazy. That is not at all what is going on here. And you need to get a hold of yourself, and you need to realize, like Shonda was saying, you need to go get a coffee. You need to go wash your face. You need to go do something. But sometimes that's needful, because we can get so just wrapped around the axle about stuff, and all it takes is an outside perspective to just be like, no, that is not at all what's going on, and that's not what's going on. Better than that. So that's a big one for me, is just having those trusted people that you can speak to, that will not be afraid to speak truth back to you.
Yeah. I have friends that I will literally say, hey, I just need a vent, and they know that's cue for I'm just frustrated and I need to get it off my chest. And then I'm going to go back to, you know, the right perspective. Because I know what it is. Sometimes that even happens even within marriage. There can be things that are frustrating, discouraging in any marriage, but especially in a ministry marriage. And sometimes having that trusted friend that gets it, they know your marriage isn't in trouble. They know you just need to let this one thing go, and then you can forgive and let love cover that sin, and they're not going to be angry at your husband, and they're not going to hold it against him or whatever. So that idea, but I let them know, and I always tell friends that I have this relationship with, if you need to vent, let me know. I'm not going to, otherwise I'm going to be trying to counsel and like solve your problem. Right. But sometimes, you know, you just want to share that hurt. Kimberly, what would you say to that?
I love the thought too of having that special girlfriend, because though I can use my husband to vent with, sometimes he can take that offense towards that church member that then I'm done with because I vented and I'm good, but then he's carrying. So sometimes having someone even more removed, because he will sometimes be my defender, I think is beautiful. And to have that girlfriend who knows your weaknesses too, who kind of will say, you know, sometimes you tend to bend this way. Do you think? And then sometimes have a girlfriend who will sit there and say, ouch, that hurts. And let me cry with you and let me pray with you. And she's going to text you over the next week or month to check in. And you just know somebody knows. In some ways, that girlfriend becomes the voice of Jesus, I think, because you know Jesus knows. Yeah. And so I think it's beautiful if you have one or two Christian sisters who can, they're almost like a ministry partner with you, because they're helping hold you up as you serve in the church.
That's really good. I think that was very well put. Having them pray with you, having someone who just gets it, having someone to just say, hey, I understand. And I think you brought up a great point. We can't always bring those things to our husbands, because sometimes, I know there's sometimes I see what Josh is bearing, or he's got his own load of discouragement. I don't want to add to that. I want to be a joyful wife. And sometimes being able to just share that with another pastor's wife and say, this is just, I'm so tired of this. I'm done. And they know I'm not done, you know, but they're able to take that and say, I'm praying for you. And that was so stupid. And you're right. And it's wrong. And just to have that voice of validation and friendship can just mean the world and help us move forward. Now, I know another thing that we do when we deal with discouragement, and I think this is important. This is the main truth. I think it's encouraging yourself in the Lord. I think that's where we would all go if we had to just sum up. If I asked each one of you individually, how do you deal with discouragement? Well, I go to Jesus. David did this. In fact, I think it's fascinating, by the way, because sometimes I've heard different things. I don't know about you ladies, but I'm in ministry groups where women are dealing with discouragement ministry, and they get counsel like this. I know those people walked away, but just focus on your kids. Your kids, you can raise them to love Jesus, or focus on the ones that haven't walked away, or just focus on your husband. And that's nice, but in a way, I think, you know, that's not the true answer for discouragement, because I've seen ministry kids walk away. I'm doing my best to raise my kids. I'm praying for them to follow Jesus all their lives, never to walk from him, but they could someday, because they have a free will. My husband, he's a good man, but he's a sinner. I don't know what tomorrow holds. So I'm not going to I don't think we can place our happiness and security and fulfillment ministry and in Christianity in any other area besides in the Lord. So David encouraged himself in the Lord. How do you encourage yourself in who he is? What are resources that you use? What are practical steps that you do to encourage yourself in him? Kimberly, start us off here.
Sometimes I have to change up what I'm doing in my quiet time. If I'm in a real season, I can feel like, okay, the wheels keep turning, and I have to step back and say, I've got to change this up. And whether that be I elongate the amount of scripture I'm reading, or I shorten it extremely, I try to find ways to change up my quiet time, even from the order. I don't know how you ladies are. I tend to, my quiet time works in this system. And sometimes to be like, no, I'm throwing it out. I need to change everything. I'm a big fan. I make my children do this a lot, of a praise page. And I will literally hand them a piece of notebook paper, and I will say, I will not take it back until every square inch is covered with something you're thankful for. From the smallest thing, like the color blue and a hot shower, to the fact that Jesus has forgiven me. And to have to kind of pull myself out of the depths and to say, by the end, I had more to be thankful for than I had room to write, often for me has helped me reorient my thinking.
That is something that I'm hoping to do in the future, is to actually write a list. And this is, maybe I'll have two lists, one about the attributes of God and then one about ministry, because sometimes I do need that in the dark times I've sat and the Lord's convicted my heart. You know, you're struggling with where you're at, and we a lot of times do. We think the grass is greener, and we see someone else's ministry and we think, oh, I want to be there. And sometimes the Lord has to bring me back to, here's what you have. And if you were over here, you wouldn't be happy about this and this and this. And so looking in the positives, we can all find something positive about the place that we're called to serve and the people we're called to serve. So I think making a list that maybe you keep on your phone or your planner that you could go to on those dark days, a list about the things of God, whether you've read the book, None Like Him, or you just start listing out as you read scripture and you say, these are the attributes of God that I want to remember. And you go back to those in the dark days. I have two verses to share on that note, Kimberly. Psalm 73:26 says, my flesh and my heart faileth, but God is the strength of my heart, and he's my portion forever. He's what I get. Psalm 16:5 says the same thing. The Lord is the portion of mine inheritance and of my cup, and he maintaineth my lot. The idea is God maintains every tomorrow I have, and realizing that he is what we get. So often we're looking for the things we want to have in ministry or want to get, and when we don't have those things met, we can become discouraged. And so remembering that he's our portion and who he is. So, Jay, what about you? What would you add to that, encouraging yourself in the Lord?
I think looking back on past wins is big, you know, especially when you feel like maybe things aren't moving in the direction that you want them to. Looking back to what God has done. You know, he did this and he did this and he brought us through this and he got us here. Kind of puts your current situation in a little bit different perspective, knowing that, you know, he's done it before, he can do it again. And he may not do it the way I think he needs to do it. Very rarely does he ever do it the way we think it needs to happen. But
and he won't do it the same way the next time.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's what I've learned.
And, you know, it may come in right at the last second. It may be, you know, you may be like, okay, well, Lord, I need you to do this right here. And you're like, it's not happening. It's not happening, when all the while this is happening over here. And then one day you're like, oh, wow, I can't believe that. But just reminding yourself of those past victories, building those altars, like we see all through the Old Testament of, you know, God did this here, God did this here, God did this here. And I know I'm going to look back on this and there's going to be an altar here too, to what God has done.
I think that's a powerful concept you just mentioned. And how do we build modern day altars that we pass by, that remind us of those moments and those things that God only could have done? Whether it's a reminder on your phone, sometimes Facebook, if we'll post things on Facebook and be open and vulnerable and share what God did, the memories will bring that up. Maybe we mark it on a calendar. If you're a planner girl, you put it on your planner. But ways that you bring those altars up, maybe it's something you put in your house. Maybe you make a praise board in your house. Maybe you just make a journal and you've got your praise journal of things that God answered, things he did. Prayer requests he answered. But having places that we pass by and we can see that and we go back and we remember what he did, I think that's powerful. And Shonda, I did it again. I left you to last. So it's kind of like playing Family Feud. You're the last one. What has not already been said that you could add?
Yeah, being thankful and habitually looking for God's hand in everything. And I say habitually because sometimes we can get into the habit of not and just seeing the bad in everything and just like nothing good. So making it more of a habit. And if you have to write it down, whatever you have to do. Yeah. Changing it up. I am right there with Kimberly on that with my quiet times. Like I'm like always doing something completely different with that. I just need that change all the time. And then another thing that I do is, I think about being heavenly minded instead of earthly minded in expectation, specifically with my expectations, and to have a low expectation of earthly resources and a high expectation of heavenly provision. As far as,
Speak to that a little more. Can you give us a practical example? Because this is intriguing to me. And so how does that practically play out?
So Discouragement can happen when our expectations of earthly resources is too high. Our husbands, we expect.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
You're saying what I was going to ask. So what do you mean earthly resources? Our husbands. Go ahead.
So for an example, our husband, it isn't earthly. I don't want to call it a resource, but
Yeah.
Whenever we have a high expectation of even God-given earthly resources, like our pastor, well, for all of us, that's our husband. So, but like for anybody, whatever even God-given resources he has given you for this earth, we can have too high of an expectation on those things because we live in a fallen world and we're all sinners, and this earth, its systems, the people in it, all of those things are going to fail us. And having a higher expectation of the heavenly provision, just good old-fashioned miracles, the fact that God can do a miracle in whatever it is that's discouraging us, maybe a hopeless relationship or a child that's gone astray or an illness, a physical disease or diagnosis, financial, like whatever it is. Just the fact that we actually, like God tells us, we can have a very high expectation of his heavenly, so just to be heavenly minded and not so earthly minded in our expectations. Does that make sense? I think
that's good. And what you're saying, I think so. I think that's kind of answering some of the questions that we didn't quite get to about how to prevent discouragement, being heavenly minded. And I think sometimes we're going to talk about right now, how can discouragement, whether it be through form of criticism or those expectations that haven't been met, how can it help us be heavenly minded? So what good can discouragement bring? And I know this is kind of a pop question, so I'm going to start on this one, and you can add stuff in. I'm not going to ask each of you, but if you have some, you're going to have to jump in here, okay? But I think what you said, Shonda, is powerful, is keeping a heavenly focus. And I think there are some things that when we face discouragement, we need to remember. We at our church got to hear a speaker recently. It was Beth Moore, and she was talking about the butt knots. The way she said it was really funny. Yes, the butt knots. Shonda, did you hear it too, or was that you, Kimberly? I just missed who said it.
That was me.
Okay, Kimberly.
It was so good.
Okay, it was great, and it comes from the passage in 2 Corinthians 4:8-9. I'm going to share it in a minute, but she was talking about when we are just being pressed and we are being discouraged, that we need to go to the truth and we need to remember the butt knots. Okay, what are the butt knots? Here they are. We are troubled on every side, but not distressed. We're perplexed, but not in despair. We're persecuted, but not forsaken. And we're cast down, but not destroyed. And I think sometimes when we face discouragement and we're having that earthly realm, the earthly view you're talking about, Shonda, is so bad, then we have to get our heavenly glasses on and say, okay, here's the truth. I'm going to see beyond this to what's really true. And here's what's true. I may feel like it's all over. I may feel like I'm done, I'm used up, but I'm not. But God has not forsaken me. God is not done here in this situation. And I think claiming that truth from 2 Corinthians 4 is so important. So I think that's one of the things that criticism does, is it makes us really put a heavenly focus on things and go to truth, because we're saying, okay, there's all this going on. What is truth? The other thing, I'll share this, and if anyone has anything to add, this is your time to jump in. The thing that criticism has done for me recently in discouragement was that it has strengthened my resolve in a new way that I've never experienced. I realized the Lord really spoke to my heart as I began having more criticism brought my way and more discouragement. And it was funny because I told the ladies in my small group, it's been about since August. It's not been anything major, y'all. I'm okay by God's grace, but it's been little things that have just been all different areas, and it's been kind of continual since August. I think I'm coming through it. I think it's almost over. But it'd be like one thing and then another. It was just like this little dark cloud. It wasn't raining and pouring, but there was just this little dark cloud, and it was like shocking to me because it was all different areas, all different things. And it was just like, don't be too encouraged. And the thing that the Lord spoke to my heart about is, you know, Heather, you have prayed and asked me to do greater things with you, to teach you greater things, to take you, like, what is it that Hillsong says, to deeper waters. You want to go there with me. You want to be used by me. But if you do, it's going to happen. There's going to be criticism. And I found a quote, I think it's by Aristotle, and he said, to avoid criticism, do nothing, say nothing, and be nothing. And I thought about that from the Christian perspective, and the Lord really challenged my heart. He said, Heather, if you don't want to be criticized, then you don't have to do anything for me. You don't have to say anything for me. You don't have to be anything for me, and you will not be criticized. But ladies, if we look around, you cannot see one person making an impact on this world for Jesus Christ who is not being criticized, sometimes even by other people who claim to have the same faith. And that's a sad thing, but it's just part of the spiritual attack. And so for me, it really strengthened my resolve. And I don't think in a bad way, but in a good way, made me say, yes, Lord, I would rather follow you into those places. And I know more will come. If I write any little tiny thing, someone's going to want to talk about what I left out or how I didn't say something right. If I say any little thing, probably even on this video, y'all, someone's going to take something we said maybe even and be like, that was terrible. But are we going to speak out when God leads us to? Are we going to follow him to those places? And so for me, I think criticism and discouragement has actually done me some good. It's taken me to the truth, and it's strengthened my resolve to just follow him anywhere that he chooses to lead me. So any other things that I'm missing there on criticism? I know we addressed already how it can help you see things that you need to grow in. Anything else that you think we've not added there? And then we'll have one or two more questions before we wrap this up. Anyone got anything to add? Okay. Then let's kind of deal with this. This is going to be a multi-layered question, so you can address any part of it. Okay. If I'm going to name two questions, and you can answer either one. How do you prevent criticism? Like, how do you build up guards against criticism? And how do you do it without becoming cold or distant? We talked about that a little bit. How do you say, okay, I'm getting a tougher skin, but I'm not going to be cold to people? And then how do you help your family deal with criticism? How can you help maybe your husband or your kids? So I'm going to actually call on each of you, and then you can address any or all of that. Okay. So Shonda, what do you say to those? Any thoughts on that?
Letting me start on this one. So how do you avoid building up walls when you've been criticized? I guess for me, it's just forgive and then give grace to them and move on and just keep loving anyway. That's something that the first couple years of being a pastor's wife, I really I let it totally put me down. And like you were saying, Heather, it was like a constant coming at me from all different areas. Just seemed to be the cloud was there for the whole first 2 years, and it was a long and dark time. And I did kind of stop, like I knew I wasn't going to give up, like you were saying, Heather, but I also didn't know how to proceed. And but over the years of being here, I have learned to forgive and to, we all need grace. And another thing is I can learn from anyone, even people who are wrong.
Oh, that's good.
Because I am a right really good and wrong person. Like they say, oh, you're a prophet. And I'm like, please don't ever call me that. In fact, your mother-in-law is the one that is always telling me that. She's like, oh, Sean, you're a prophet. That's why.
And you're like, here are the 3 reasons I'm not.
Yeah.
Reading the line.
Yes. And so that being said, just seeing that right and seeing that wrong. So I can't let it go because they're wrong. But I've just had to learn that I can learn even from someone being wrong. Like God can do that. Yeah. God can take bad things and use them for his good. He can take people who aren't even believers and teach me something. And he can use unbelievers to teach me things. And I'm sure somebody will probably send an email about that statement. But I really do believe that. Like you look through scripture and all throughout scripture, he uses, I didn't really agree with all of the preferences that David had in his life for his, relationships on this earth. I don't prefer my husband to be married to multiple women, but you know what? I can still learn from David. God can still use David to teach me something. So God can use anybody to teach me a lesson, even if they're wrong.
Yeah. I think a great resource that you're kind of, the stuff you're mentioning is good. If you are a person that you say, you know what, I do struggle with being critical to other people because I just see how it needs to be. Or if you're the person that you're like, wow, I'm under a lot of attack and I'm not dealing with a lot of grace givers, Grace Awakening by Chuck Swindoll is a fantastic book. I actually got it this summer when all this stuff started. I ordered it, primed it, got it in 2 days. And it's just an encouragement because it helps you, I think, develop grace for those who aren't giving you grace. So I recommend that for both sides of the coin here. Grace Awakening by Chuck Swindoll. Good. All right, Jay, what about you? Either one of those questions.
Yeah, one of the things you mentioned was helping your kids deal with criticism. And, my son is 12 and my daughter's 8. So they're getting to that age where they start to notice things and see things and people say things, not in a mean way. We've been very blessed in that way. Our church is a very loving church and is very grace giving towards our kids. But, one of my concerns has always been that they not grow up resenting the ministry or, not wanting to be in the ministry later on because of what they've seen or what they've witnessed. So a big thing I try to always do is just point out, you get to do this because your dad's the pastor. You get to, we were clearing some land that we had gotten recently, and we pulled Davey out of school that day so he could help David clear the land. And it's like, you got to miss school today and go play around in the woods because your dad's the pastor.
Yeah.
Point out these cool things, these cool side benefits, those blessings that I believe are blessings from the Lord. You minister for me, you serve for me, and I'm gonna put these little happy blessings in your life here and there, and encouraging them that way. Yeah, maybe you had to miss this activity because we had church activity, but you got to do this, this, and this at the same time.
Yeah. And
then for my husband, a big one is I try to be that person that we need when he's discouraged to point out, well, recently we had 2 very large families move away. And we were talking about, some of the fluctuations in attendance and stuff like that. And I said, well, hon, that's just those 2 families. I was like, and they both moved because of jobs. That's not you. That's not the church. That's life. That's just the way things happen sometimes. But just being that voice of truth to our husbands sometimes and allowing them to see the situation for what it is, not for what we sometimes start to think it is in our own head.
I love it. A voice of truth. So good. And truth about the blessings and truth about what's actually going on. Kimberly, what about you? What do you add to this?
I think I'm going to go along Jay's line of talking to my children or my husband or perhaps even myself in a discouraging time. I always want my kiddos to know, I don't want them to pretend like they have to pretend that their heart wasn't hurt, So I want them to be like, yes, I could see how that hurt or how that came across. So I don't want them to ever feel like, I can't talk to mom about anything because mom's going to be like, oh, it's no big deal. Whatever. We love Jesus. Let's keep going. I want them to know, hey, I can let mom in. And then sometimes I can help them then walk through that. And even with my husband sometimes I think he perceives things differently. And so then what he will say, and then I can come in and I think I can paint the picture a little differently as far as I think they were coming from this angle. Or I know those words sounded this way, but I think their intention was this. So I don't ever want us to pretend that we weren't hurt or irritated, because then I think that just festers. And then it just grows.
And it's not being real. It's not being a real Christian and we want to live authentic lives before our kids.
Right. It's so true. And then for me, I've even learned sometimes things hurt. And when I don't want to pray for the person who is irritating me, then I know it's on my end and not just on their end. Because when I don't want to pray for them, it's personal. And sometimes my prayer just wants to be, God, just help them to see it my way. So that's still personal. So when I can really sit back and say, Jesus, you know that my heart is hurting here, but I'm still praying that you would bless them today. And you know what blessing they need. That helps me a lot. And even with my kids or my husband, sometimes I say, I think we need to pray for this person or this family or this situation, because that usually shows how irritated I am. At least that's how I am.
I think you wrapped up really well for us with the idea of we need to pray. We need to pray for those that bless us and that persecute us, and pray with our children and with our husbands for those people as well. So if you've been listening to this video, we hope you've been encouraged. Share with us in the comments what we left out. What did we forget? What else? How do you encourage yourself in the Lord? How do you help your children, your husband? Share with us, maybe verses. Share with others verses that you've used. Also, we hope that you'll consider joining us for Idea Day in January. It's the 28th and 29th. You should, ladies, I'm speaking directly to you, okay? I know there may be some men watching, but ladies, this is for you. Consider coming with your husbands. Listen, I get it. We are the glue that holds things together, and I don't always get to travel with my husband. I don't make every conference, but we do hope you'll come. This year, it's a special 2-day conference, which is unusual for Idea Day, and I'm excited about that as a woman because I know that we take longer than men do to connect. I'm amazed how quickly men can just become buddies and they are just best friends, and it doesn't take that long. My husband can have a coffee appointment with a man and boom, 1 hour, they've covered everything. I'm telling you, it is rough for me to even get started with a lady in 1 hour. So we've got 2 days to get to know one another. These ladies will be joining me on the Pastor's Wife panel. If you have other things, topics, whether you'd like to hear it maybe in a roundtable session, those are not always gender specific. We attend those. It's great. You can go to one with your husband. You can go to one by yourself there, because we all have different giftedness and callings in ministry. So if there's a specific roundtable that you'd like to hear, whether it's something that you think would be great to hear from a pastor's wife, or maybe it's something to hear from one of the pastors, let us know topics that you're interested in, questions that you have. Maybe we didn't deal with something. You say, you know, it's great you had this thing on discouragement, but I would like this question to come up in the Pastor's Wife panel. Then comment that. Let us know. Sign up for Idea Day at Idea Day. I think it's ideaday.com. Probably should have checked that for this video. Kimberly, Jay, and Shonda, you are wonderful ladies and encouragement to my heart. Thank you for being here and just sharing so openly with all of us what you've experienced and how God has taught you things through discouragement. All right, y'all have a great day. We will see you at Idea Day.